a fascist, a racist, a communist, an oppressed Muslim woman, an Islamophobe, and a race traitor. Thanks to the internet cancel mob that hates everyone who isn't aligned to their doublethink ideology. Mind you, these laughable insults came during lockdown. And maybe who knows, next week, the leftist snowflakes and trolls online will be saying I'm some gender-fluid, two-spirited Grinch. So I've discovered something peculiar that's been breeding beneath our feet, spreading like a cancer-filled cockroaches into our universities, into our children's schools, into our political parties, and sadly, our family units. It is a mentality of victimhood, a faith that has oppressed its believers. No, I'm not talking about Islam. But before I introduce this plague to you, I'd like to take you on a journey on how we got here and how we allowed it to spread. Now imagine, it is the late 40s. Swing music is all the rage. World War II just ended, with millions of lives lost and many countries completely ravaged. A large influx of refugees and migrants began pouring into Australia in search for a new life. You see, back then, this kind of movement from humans from one place to another wasn't part of an ideology, as it seems to be now. There was no ism. Multiculturalism was not the term bandied about. That was the catalyst that brought my father-in-law, father and mother here to Australia. So my Hungarian father-in-law escaped a concentration camp as the Russians were taking control of Eastern Europe. He told me about how he waited for the rain to set over the camp. He and his best friend knew that the communist soldiers would leave patrol spots to seek shelter from the elements. And during this heavy, stormy day, they narrowly escaped, swimming through rivers, and with the help of sympathetic countrysiders who fed them bread and lard. They then weaved their way through trains that were infested with Russian communist soldiers. My father-in-law tells me that even he had to hide beneath the skirt of an elderly woman to avoid being spotted by Russian soldiers. Eventually found his way to Allied France. From there he made his way to Australia, his new home. Even through all he endured, he did not carry a victim mentality, but rather he worked hard to overcome and achieve a better life for him and his family. The same occurred with my mother and father. They left a divided sectarian, a revolution-ravaged Middle East for Australia. They treated this opportunity like receiving the golden ticket from Willy Wonka. They regarded this ticket as a privilege and not a right. They stood proud and appreciated that they had the opportunity to forge a new life away from war and hardship. When they migrated here from Lebanon, they expected vast changes into their new country. I'm sure the quote from Wizard of Oz, "We're not in Kansas anymore, Toto," would have been appropriate to how they and other immigrants must have felt when first arriving in Australia. It is this attitude of appreciation and respect of our country's history and culture that no demands were made upon Australia and its citizens. Demands to alter history or to erase its culture of its nation's people. Due to the high regard in which Australia was held, prevented the victim mentality from surfacing its ugly head. Let us not forget this was an era with no handouts, no corporate-style NGOs, and no woke leftist movements, but rather an era of introduction of multicultural food, such as the Turkish coffee, the Italian cannoli, the Lebanese hummus and tabbouleh, and the Greek souvlaki, and the list is endless. Now, my mother's first job, like many immigrants, was Homebush Arnott's factory. She tells me, besides the word hello, she believes her first real word was hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. So I laugh at that too. Which says a few things about her work ethics as well as the workforce attitude that many other old school immigrants Mum and Dad both worked hard. They managed to live the Australian dream, purchasing numerous properties here and abroad. My mother told me back then that yes, Australian culture was unfiltered. People spoke their minds. There were insults like wog, nipper, skip, ranger, and so forth thrown about. But just as it was dished out. Nobody had a sook, nobody took offence or demanded a safe space. But if one got catcalled, they turned around and gave them the finger, I'm not going to do that now, and just moved on. When I was 2.5 years old, my siblings and I lost our father. Mum insured, Mum a widow now, she instilled the ethos of hard work into my siblings and I. Mum taught us to work hard and achieve our ambitions, but most importantly, she taught us to listen so that you learn. With a bit of hard work and knowledge, we can achieve anything we set our minds to. At the same time, my mum taught us Arabic, the Islamic religion, and our cultural heritage from the Middle East. Much to my mother's delight, and not surprisingly, I became that individual that was independent, business-minded, critical thinking, a no-nonsense type of person, thick-skinned, not easily offended, and yes, an Australian Muslim conservative. My mother's view... My mother's views were unique. For instance, if she saw a mohawk, rainbow, lorikeet hairstyle skateboarder, far from being offended by the way he looked or dressed, she would instead be curious and engage in a conversation about how unusual his choices of fashion were, as if she was discussing art. Or if someone called her a dago, she would not get offended, but rather think to herself and say, geez, he can talk. There are only 2 instances that spring to mind, to be honest. But immigrants faced tough times, which only further motivated them to achieve the Australian dream. Offended was not part of the vernacular. I thought that was a clever perspective my mother showed, because it reminded us to look at a person as an individual and to respect their point of difference. These points of difference were not offensive to old school immigrants. They just knew that this was the Australian way, because people were more of a larrikin, and it was said tongue-in-cheek. Being offended was not a thing. Take, for instance, the hard-working Italians, Greeks, Arabs, and Vietnamese communities that evolved synergistically within Australia over the last several decades. They integrated into Australian society and became a vital part of it. When someone threw a slur at them, they too did not have a sook. They showed their worth and became respected. So in one sense, we are the world's most successful society when it comes to embracing differences. Now it goes without saying, a nation of immigrants. This is enshrined in our second verse of our national anthem. For those who've come across the seas with boundless plains to share. Australia, and in fact most migrant countries, immigrant nations, are doing well. They were vibrant, integrated, multicultural societies. They were melting pots. And if you didn't like the country you were in, you were free to leave, and that was that. Mm-hmm. And that was not even considered racist, it said. Now let's fast forward 40 odd years. And oh, bloody hell, how the landscape has changed. Mm-hmm. Gone the good old days of immigration and the illusion of multiculturalism. So ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to the most oppressive form of control, the new religion of all nations, the religion of I am offended. A religion which expects people to lose their identity because of their ideology. The religion of being offended has germinated due to the mindset to possess and to manipulate and to indoctrinate, and to have this indoctrination spread like a cancerous tumour, eating away at our fabric of our society. We have become a society where one group's history, by its very nature, offends another group's sensibilities. And demands are then placed to erase the past in the name of hurt feelings. We have evolved into a society where hollow symbolism, empty gestures, virtual signalling, and apologies have become a substitute for a real narrative of cohesion. We now see a world with no respect or appreciation. We find ourselves living in a world where the victim mentality reigns supreme. supreme. And following this mentality is a sense of entitlement, which has led to the cancelling of history and culture and toppling down historical monuments. And the once sought after and appreciated Willy Wonka ticket had now become a right and nothing but a distant memory for those who came to Australia for the good life, like my father-in-law and parents. So why has society become suddenly offended by the national anthem, historical figures, Easter, Christmas, two genders, cultural appropriation, beautiful art, all lives matter, literally everything under heaven above? What is the agenda of this new religion? Okay, it is to divide us. It is to create new classes based on the colour of your skin and the gender you identify with. It is to radicalise our children and make them believe that all men are rapists and that society is brainwashing them to be a gender that they are not. It is to make them believe that they are so oppressed that the only form of liberation from this offence is to riot in the streets, join organisations like Antifa, and plot the downfall of the boogeyman Western civilization. The core of this religion is quite old. It is the newest incarnation of an ideology we have already defeated. The prophets of offence are the same as those of the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. The agenda of this cultural Marxism to cause everyone to be so outraged that burning down cities seems so normal that one wouldn't bat an eyelid when suddenly communists are elected into our government, because in our offence, the Orwellian and controlling policies seems like the only way out of this manufactured injustice all around us, taking us back to the medieval era. The religion of I am offended is another tool of a cultural war that we are fighting, whether we know it or not. From Black Lives Matter to the feminist movements, the political correct brigade, the freedom of speech protagonists are using this religion as a front for their communist agenda. Ironically, you will find the same tree-hugging communist organisation, those mouthpieces who shout the loudest, shout the loudest about human rights, open borders, the political correctness lovers. These are the very same people who will not allow constructive discourse if you dare to disagree with them. Well, I say we no longer live in a generation, we no longer want to live in a generation of emotionally weak people, where everything must be watered down because it's offensive, including the truth. We need a purge. We need to purge our education system of these leftist teachers and professors. We need to teach the future generation never to give up hope and never to give in to this new form of oppression. Because if history teaches us anything, the truth always prevails. I would like to end this quote by Mr. Anonymous. History is not there for you to like or dislike. It is there for you to learn from. And if it offends you, even better, because then you are less likely to repeat it. It is not yours to erase, because it belongs to all of us. Thank you, everybody.
Woo! Emma!
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a short break. Thank you.
Best
People were tired
speech.
of seniors make up 30% of the voters of their split.